Welcome to this episode of Between Two Brands. I am still your host, Bill Petrie. Glad you're here with me. Glad you're coming along with me on this ride. I'm having a good time. I hope you guys are too. I think we've got a really good show today. I'm pretty excited about it, to be honest with you. But before we do, you know what we have to do, right? Say it along with me. We need to pay the rent. Hey, folks, there is so much good coming out of Bell Promo these days. Here's just a few things. Lowest minimums in the industry. Yeah, you can belt promo that. Deepest inventory around, you can belt promo that. How about 5-star and A+ service? Absolutely, you can belt promo that. How about 2-day production on most of their products? Oh, you can belt promo the heck out of that. Now, if that weren't enough, and honestly, I think it probably should be, the good folks at Bell Promo have a few other things they'd like to share. Made in the USA merchandise, of course, you can Bell Promo that. It's important right now with America 250 looming on the horizon. How about free shipping on tech and apparel items? That's right, you can Bell Promo that too. So Bill Petrie, as your host of this fine platinum level broadcast, invite you to head over to bellpromo.com to see all of their amazing products and feel confident that when your client asks you to create branded merchandise that's available, low minimums, 2-day production, you can tell them, yeah, you can Bell Promo that. I had a couple things I was going to talk about today leading up to our guest, but that went out the window with the passing of Norman Cohn, the chairman emeritus of ASI this past week, this past Friday, actually. It's hard to see titans of the industry, and my goodness, there's not a bigger titan to the industry than Norm Cohn. It's hard to see them leave. It's hard to see them pass away, quite frankly. I don't know what to say here. I found myself emotional when I heard the news. I guess no one should be surprised when someone who's had such a full life, lived 93 years, passes away. But still, it's a shock. And I almost liken it to, you have a grandma or a grandfather who's maybe 90 years old and in failing health, not that Norm was, but you're kind of waiting for something to happen and then it does, and you're still shocked by it. And that's kind of how I felt with Norm. But I will tell you, he was so vibrant up until the end. Last time I saw him was ASI Chicago last year, and he was just as sharp as a tack as he ever was. And so I thought I would share kind of my thoughts on Norm and his legacy in the industry and what he meant to me personally. And this really came into focus. I'm recording this on Wednesday, the April 29th. I actually watched the live stream yesterday of his service in Pennsylvania, and it was truly lovely. I saw not only his grandchildren speak, but his kids speak. Certainly Matthew and Stephanie, who I know a little bit, and all of them were so eloquent, and there was absolutely a tinge of sadness for sure, as there should be. But what I saw more than anything when I watched that is I think what we all would want. It was a celebration of life. I can't count how many hot dog mentions there were, which I found lovely because Norm loved his hot dogs. It's one of the reasons we have those hot dogs at the ASI show. And that has fed me lunch many times. I think I was trying to remember the first time I met Norm. And I think it was about 20 years ago. I was still at Halo, and I was invited to sit on a panel discussing recruiting practices in the promotional products industry. And I sat on a panel at the ASI Orlando show. And I remember my stance was, if someone comes to an organization I'm working with and says they're unhappy, I have no problem telling them what the company I'm with offers, why it might be a better fit for them, so on and so forth. I never felt it was great targeting specific organizations to try to recruit salespeople away. That was just never my thing. But that was the topic, was poaching salespeople. And Marvin Spike, who was the former president of ASI, strongly disagreed with me, and I was already nervous and kind of called me out in front of the other panelists, in front of the audience that was there. Being younger, I certainly didn't appreciate it, and even looking back, I feel it was ill-timed. He was kind of salty, to be honest with you. But afterwards, Norman came up to me and had a far more reasoned and tempered approach. He said he still disagreed with my perspective, but he was such a gentleman about it. And the one thing when I think of Norm Cohn, the one word I come up with, and I think of this often when people pass away, what's the one word I would use to describe that person? And for Norm, it was embodied in that moment, and it was kindness. He still disagreed with what I had to say, but he was kind about it, and he was always open to listening to the other side of the equation, which I really, really appreciated. Over the years, I had many conversations with Norm, and he was always so elegant, always so appreciative. I've spoken at many ASI events, and he's always made it a point to come and say, "Thank you. We appreciate you being here." My favorite memory of Norm, I think, was ASI Fort Worth, and I think we're coming up, it was just about 2 years ago. And I was giving a session that was very technology focused, very AI focused, and in how to leverage that in our industry. And I'll never forget, Norm walked in about 3 minutes in. So it was just as I'd started. So I'm just trying to find a rhythm. And Norm walks in and sits down. And I figured, again, if you have ever done any public speaking, you're doing 500 equations at once. And I was thinking, okay, I'm going to keep going. Norm's going to be here for a minute. He's going to leave. And then Andy Cohen came in, no relation. And Tim Andrews came in, and they sat there. And I was like, okay, so I'm processing basically a lot of the leadership of ASI sitting in there watching me as I'm trying to give this session. It was a pretty packed session. And I got through the session, but my eyes always gravitated toward no, Norm. He was just such a presence in the room. And as it happens from time to time, when you're done speaking, people will come up, say, I have a question, or here's my card. Can I have your slides? So on and so forth. And I was packing them and walking out, and Norm had waited for me. And as he usually did when I spoke, he said, "I just want to thank you again for coming." And he put his arm on my shoulder, or his hand on my shoulder, and said, "That was one of the most impactful sessions I believe I've ever seen. You've really got a talent." And it was one of the nicest compliments I ever received. And so I love that. So I think when I think of Norm's legacy, he was always curious and all that. We know that. But man, what a legacy of kindness he leaves behind. And I'll close this little preamble by saying what Norm always said: God bless America, hug your families, and the best is yet to come. Godspeed, Norm. Thank you for your service to the industry. All right, before we get to my guest, which I'm really excited about, let's go ahead and pay one last bill, shall we? Many people know how to build a business, but few understand not only when to sell that business, but the process involved to ensure that you find the right partner to maximize the return on your investment. Honestly, this is where you need an expert, especially a promotional products expert, to help you, which is where our friends over at Certified Marketing Consultants come in. Jamie Watson and her team have literally decades of experience in facilitating private company sales in the branded merchandise space. Now, to help you evaluate if it's time to sell your business, reach out to Certified Marketing Consultants at info@certifiedmarketing.com for a confidential discussion today. All right, let's go ahead and bring on the guest. My guest today, he doesn't need an introduction, but let's waste some of his time, your time, and my time and do it anyway. He is the market economist and public affairs lead at PPAI. That's the Promotional Products Association International, for those of you keeping score at home, where he leads research and advocacy for the branded merchandise industry. He works closely with top suppliers and distributors to deliver insights on market trends, supply chains, and end buyer behavior, and represents the industry on key policy issues, including trade, tariffs, and regulations. Please join me in welcoming my friend, Alok Bhat. Alok, thank you for joining me today on the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure being on your podcast, Bill, and it's a pleasure meeting you last week in person at Washington as well.
Yeah, it was a good time, and I'm sure we're going to talk about LEAD, which we were both in Washington, D.C. last week, and we'll get to that in a second. But before we do, I want to know about, I always love knowing about people's journey, how they got to the promotional products industry. So tell me a little bit about your background, your education. How did you find this crazy industry?
Absolutely. I think I've been with PPI close to 3 years now, but
Mhm.
prior to this, I spent over a decade in consulting, working with Accenture, and primarily in marketing and strategy, applied intelligence and so-called analytics in those days, and developing solutions for large organization, which includes Fortune 500 companies. So, and also has some expertise at mergers and acquisition partnerships kinds roles as well. So I've been always been with how business thinks, how they make decision, and how the strategy actually plays out. But what really drew me at PPI was an opportunity to apply my skills and thinking at the industry level, not just at a one company level, for the entire ecosystem. So
Right.
today I'm in an intersection between research and public affairs, which are two different worlds, but they're connected really well. So I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, very no, very much so. And I was about to ask, you split your time between two super important things to everybody in the industry: research, things like market trends and buyer behavior, things like that, and policy issues, tariffs, how independent contractors are allocated in with tax representation, so on and so forth. I have a couple questions. What does your average day look like? Because those are way two different brains. How do you balance both aspects of your job?
Amazing. I think it's really a mix. What makes it interesting is on the one side, I look at trends, what's happening with suppliers, distributors, end buyers, and then, consumers, and what businesses are seeing pressure or growth. On the other side, I'm translating those conversation whether to the industry leaders or the policymakers.
Yeah.
So it's just not about understanding the data, it's about making these insights useful to make
Right.
some real world decisions, right? So, yeah.
Right. Well, it's a real value add to membership, I know. Now, from a research perspective, what trends are you seeing right now that you can share with everybody?
I think I'm seeing majorly three trends that showing up at the same time, which is pretty interesting. And we are tracking it on in a monthly basis as well. So the first trend is demand is shifting towards higher value. So which means we are seeing a demand shift, higher value products where buyers are choosing fewer items but a better quality. So, when we spoke to a lot of distributors and PPI 100 distributors, they said 79% of distributor told us there is a rise in high value or the retail branded items. At the same time, we asked similar question to the end buyers, a group of end buyers. They said that they aren't walking away from promo, but 60% that they first prefer cutting the quantity first, and only 11% said they're ready to cut on the customization part. So I think, and when we asked similar question to the consumers, they said that 83% of the promotional products that they keep it for 6 months or more. So, and
Right.
especially in the categories like apparel, drinkware, and tech. So there is a
Right.
direct ROI associated. Yeah. So
No,
that's a first trend that we are seeing. So yeah.
yeah, I see that too. Again, I'm a service provider, so I work with both suppliers and distributors, and I'm seeing the same thing that end users are wanting higher quality, more functionality, things that don't feel like cheap plastic stuff. I think, a lot of bad things came out of COVID, but I think one of the good things is that end users really are valuing what we do as an industry and see the value in people keeping things long term as opposed to something that's, for lack of a better term, a throwaway.
Yes, I think similarly, I think the trend, which is again connected some way or the other, at the same time, demand is relatively stable, but the margin are under pressure for all of our firms, both the distributors and suppliers. So a couple of months ago, when we asked this question to our distributors and suppliers, they said 49% of suppliers and around 30% of distributor reported margin declines, even though their revenue have been still growing modestly among many firms.
Mhm.
This is primarily because of the operating cost that has increased, and tariff is one among them. So
Yeah, I love it. Now, you and I work closely on GRAC, which we love our acronyms on our industry. It stands for the Government Relations Action Council. And what we do is we work together to talk about policy and what's good for the industry, so on and so forth. Why is input from membership so critical in shaping the overall PPAI view of member policy concerns?
This is a good one. For me, the starting point for GRAC was very simple. If PPI needs to advocate effectively, we need to be grounded with the real business issues, not just theory, right? So when I took this responsibility 18 months ago, the first thing that we did was getting the right infrastructure in place. That means that included bringing in thorn run partners, our lobbying firm, associates at the Capitol at the Washington, who have been ranked as one of the top 10 lobbying firm in the country by Bloomberg. So, and the second thing, what we did was revamping the GRAC committee itself. They were all great for years together, but we wanted someone who are like, from Sanma to the small business distributors, service providers, who can come tell us, advocate us the direction that they can provide. So GRAC is a super pillar for us, and that will influence what we do at Lead or other avenues that, the campaigns that we do.
I love it. And I've gone on record for years saying I think lead and GRAC are that's the most important thing PPI can do. Now, you and I were at LEAD last week. Again, we love our acronyms, Legislative Education and Action Day. And there was about 65 people that flew to Capitol Hill, and we met with staffers, some representatives, some senators to talk about the things that are important for our industry. And I always say, we're not really talking about promotional products. What we do is we advocate for small businesses through the lens of branded merchandise, because 98% of us are small business owners. I'm certainly one of them. So when we were in Capitol Hill last week, Alok, I want you to go back to your first lead event 3 years ago. Or what memory sticks out of that first one?
I think for me, what stood out was it was, kind of last lead in 2025 was my first time. It was
Okay.
for me, Dale asked me to take up this role, and then Don came and invested in the infrastructure that we requested. And then lead itself is like, there is a lot of expense. So somewhere that, there was a pressure of ROI as well on me. But what we did really good is we went with the targeted issues, and TRP was there, was helping us out. And then I would like to explain one example how lead was very effective last year is
Sure.
we took an exam. There was one issue which not all industry knows about it, which is Section 301. Which is any Chinese built ship, irrespective of the country owned. When they come to one of our port, there were the port fees of 1 million every time they come to one of our port, and then it was changed to $700+. It was indirectly affecting all of our industry and the small businesses as well. So we did advocate this at the right avenues at Lead, and also joined hands with other associations. We, drew for our CEO, president, and CEO drafted a lot of letters. We did a lot of case stories with the help of GRAC as well last year, and
Mhm.
targeted the right, offices at Capital as well. Which in turn, what happened in the month of November 2025 is they came out. The USTR clearly said that they have read all our stories. They have gone through that, all the letters that we have sent, and they have paused for a year to reassess things. So this is an, effective advocacy that we did last year. So this is one of the example. We did few other things, but every issue is a different campaign. Every issue is, we need to consider it as a different. So we do have tools and technologies and people and support
Yeah.
today. So for me, that was a memorable thing, how effective PPI and the industry members got together and make that difference.
No, I love that. I absolutely love that. What about walking into the congressional buildings for the first time? Were you nervous? Were you excited? What did you feel?
I think I'll tell you, it's not only me. I thought I'm very nervous for the first time, because what should I say and what should I be? Telling and all those things. But this is not only with us. I've seen pretty good CEOs and CXOs in the same place. They came and asked me that, look, should I be saying this? Should I be starting like this and everything? No, you don't need to be a policy expert. You don't need to know
No.
all the laws. You just need to tell a story. I think, Bill, I think I have to tell you this. You may not know. You got up and told a story about your wristband last week at the education day. Yes, that's the story. But I was in two different groups, and one with a senator and one with the other group, and they all told your story. And then when we go and tell these kind of stories, things they will resonate. So thank you
I
so
love
much for doing it. And then you,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, I remember the first time I went, and this was, I think, I can't, I lost track. I didn't go in 25. I couldn't make it last year, but I think this was my 10th out of, or my ninth out of the last 10 years, my 11th out of the last 10 years, whatever it was, because I really do believe in it. But I remember the first time how nervous I was, and I felt like I need to be a policy expert. And I studied that sheet of paper, and then you realize most of the time you're meeting with 23, 25-year-old kids who are running this country, because most of the time you do meet with staffers. Sometimes you do meet in very ornate offices that feel like, wow, I'm at a seat of power. Many times you're in a government hallway and there's people buzzing by you back and forth. And I quickly realized that it was getting personal was much more important than policy. There, especially when we had the folks with Thorn Run with us who are policy experts. So they could fill in the gaps, whereas we were able to tell personal stories, how tariffs are impacting planning, how any sort of change would impact small businesses, so on and so forth. And so I very quickly got very comfortable with it. So, but I do remember how nervous I was for a few times for sure. Have you had any surprise moments with elected officials or staffers during lead?
I think I had, yes, one moment this time stood me was with one of the senators that we had spoken last year during a coffee. And it was a very brief discussion, but the senator did remember us and the issues that we got. And that continued, basically that continued the matter because it tells that message doesn't land beyond a single meeting, right? So and what made the conversation more interesting was that he wasn't just supportive. He actually challenged us to think more strategy about the supply chain. So he encouraged us to explore the nearshoring avenues that we had and suggested to travel along with him for the South American countries to look at, the nearshoring opportunities as well, to bring in, industry leaders along with him to explore things. So that surprised in a good way because it shows the conversations are just reacting to the policies, but they are increasingly about problem solving and long-term solution that works both for an industry and for our broader economy as well.
Love that. Yeah, I've had a couple surprises. My favorite one actually happened this year. Representatives, a lot of times they'll change. Every 2 years there's an election. And I was starting to talk to a staffer and I'm like, I know you. And he goes, I know you. He was at a previous representative's office that we met like 3 years ago and he remembered me, which was that shocked me. Let me ask you this. Overall, we see the day of lead, we see all the social media posts. Why is it so important, do you think, that we go in person to Washington, D.C.? Like you said, it's a huge expense. It's an expense for PPAI. It's an expense for members. Maybe people don't know. PPAI certainly pays for the hotel and a nice dinner and so on and so forth. But I flew myself out there. And so there's expense for me. So it's really a partnership in terms of we believe in enough to invest in it. Why do you think it's so important we go to DC as a group for that day?
I think we have been continuously in touch with many of the offices, but when you go in person and talk about the issues and the stories that you tell, it matters a lot and they connect to that. And I think beyond our industry, a lot of people do not resonate that a end product, they all assume the end product comes directly 100% imported. No, that's not true. I
Right.
think the automobile industry, personally for me, automobile industry does a great work saying assembled in America. So our
Right.
products, similarly, we get raw
Right.
materials and the decoration happens here. That is the first communication that we have been doing, so making the education. There is a lot of businesses that happens here with fulfillment,
Mhm.
personalization, customization, etc. So I think it makes a lot of difference when they get to know our industry better. So being
Yeah.
there matters. So
I agree, and it's a drum I've been banging for a while that the value of the product really shifts when it's decorated with a message. It becomes something completely different. Yes, it's still a 20-ounce stainless steel tumbler, so it does the same thing. It keeps your coffee warm and so on and so forth. But when you put a message on it, and that's done here in the United States, that's created here, the messaging's created here, American workers are decorating it. That's where the value is added and it becomes something else. It's not just a product on a shelf, it's a promotional product. It's a piece of branded merchandise. So I couldn't agree more. Last question. Now, we talked earlier about how you lead research for the industry, and I thank you for that because I love the numbers that are coming out of PPAI. I think you have a global economic study coming out soon. What can you share about that?
I think what we have been sharing is a $27.1 billion distributor sales volume. I think our industry is, I mean, we actually want to evaluate as a whole economy. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to evaluate the upstream, midstream, downstream all together and trying to see what number is going to come up. So we have not only we are working with Oxford Economics, so they are expertise in this place and they have done it for a lot of other industries as well. So it's not only for our own country, we are doing it for entire world, and which we are partnering with PPPC, which is Jonathan is partnering with from a Canadian partnership, BPMA, which is British. We are partnering with Australia, New Zealand. We have been speaking to, but we do not have associations. We have also speaking to Chinese people who have been manufacturers who sit in Taiwan because they cannot speak from China. They sit in Taiwan and they have been speaking to us, giving a lot of inputs. We are speaking in India, South Africa, South America. So we are getting a lot of insights, inputs. Right now, it's in the modeling stage, and the output will be in the form of how much GDP is impacted because of this industry, jobs creation, and it will have a lot more insights. So we are trying to publish this sometime in July and August timeframe once we have the complete story. But which can be used in maybe in during our upcoming lead and
Mhm.
also for our boilerplate or something for various different firms that we have.
Love it.
So yeah.
Love it. Love it. Man, I love the conversation. Is there anything you wanted to talk about? I've been blabbering on. Is there anything you want to talk about before we
No, I
wrap
think
this up?
this has been amazing. I think Bill, knowing you personally last week again, it was been amazing. You guys are doing a great job in advocating us at CRAC. I thank you so much for volunteering your time, and you have been there for us to support time and again. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Before we say goodbye, let's say goodbye. Let's say thank you to our sponsor. Hey, huge thanks to our friends over at Bell Promo for sponsoring this platinum level podcast. If you're looking for the lowest minimums, deepest inventory, 5-star and A+ service, you can Bell Promo that. Alok, great stuff. Thank you again so much. And I know I'm going to see you at the next GRAC meeting, and we'll see you, dear listener or viewer, on the next Between Two Brands.